This is the Gentile Defender. Today I'll be replying to a comment from a dear brother of mine. He's actually a good friend of mine. I'll be replying to a comment that he made. And I wanted to reply to this in a video because, well, first of all, YouTube actually will not let me comment on my other channel because I have a second strike on that channel for hate speech and other nonsense. Like I said, I'll be responding to a good friend of mine, Full of Pestilence. This is a good dude right here. And I'm going to be responding to a comment that he made on one of my podcast episodes. So it was episode 29, and basically I talk about a couple things in that, but my main driving point is that you have to have some kind of morality, and that Christianity is the cornerstone of that morality, the belief in a higher power, the belief in Yahweh. And his response in this is, it even shadow bans like all the comments. I got to go into another section to see it. YouTube, you always make things so fucking difficult for me. So his comment was, come on. Apologies, people. He said, I've never heard of that. I'm pretty agnostic myself. You know more about Satan than I'll ever know. The Satanic Bible matters to Christianity way more than to atheism. We don't need to be guided by books to make our morals, and we don't need the concept of an afterlife to comfort us or guide our laws. So in a rebuttal to that, what I'll say is this. This is what I'll say. If you don't think that the Satanic Bible matter, or that it matters more to a Christian than it would to an atheist, again, the central point, the central thesis of the reason that the Satanic Bible was written, and you can go back in any of Anton LaVey's research, and you can go back at the original Satanic Church when it was formed, all of their research was to conclude that atheism was a gateway to Satanism, and they saw Satan as a liberating figure away from the organized way or the morale patterns of the Abrahamic religions. Now, as far as the morals and the concept of, you got to understand something. Without God, without the Abrahamic religions, without the faiths, without the parchment texts, we don't have any morality. When human beings are left to our own devices, human beings do very wicked things. When human beings are backed in a corner and they have no law of sustenance or morale or any type of teaching to look back onto, human beings will do very wicked things. Rape, murder, robbery, theft, pillaging, conquesting. These are all in the sinful nature of human beings' flesh. And without any moral standard, without any law standard, going back from a belief in a higher power, there's no standard that keeps humanity acting right. There's no other code that we can go on to. This idea of right and wrong all goes back to the Bible's clear teaching of good and evil. So right and wrong is the same concept as good and evil. Without the Bible, or I'll say the other Abrahamic faiths, you don't have that. You don't have anything to go back to in that regard. There's nothing that can teach people how to be right or wrong unless we have a merited code to judge it against. We have the Bible that teaches us the Mosaic law and the ways of God and how we should behave as human beings and what we should follow, things we should abstain from and things that we should do. Without a belief in a higher power, what is the incentive for human beings to do good? What is the incentive for human beings to do better? There is none. There is absolutely none. He also said that we don't need the concept of an afterlife to comfort us or guide our laws. But the reality is, this is the truth of the matter. The thing about the afterlife, remember something. Nobody is just being sent to hell. That is a choice that somebody makes because they choose to live their earthly life apart from God. So now they're going to live the rest of the life, the rest of their existence, away from God. That's the person's choice. And God is simply honoring the choice that the person made. Because we have free will. A common argument is that atheists will say, well, it's being shoved down our throats. Nothing's being shoved down the throat of atheists, okay? You have the free will to do whatever you would like to do during your life. But every choice that you make has consequences. And I'm sure Full of Pestilence would 100% agree with me on that. Everything you do does have a consequence. So if you choose to live your earthly life separate from God, your eternal life, so to speak, will also then be separate from God because he's honoring your wish. You chose to live without him, and you'll continue living without him. So that doesn't sound like shoving anything down someone's throat. That sounds like people have entirely free will to believe whatever that they would choose to want to believe. But then he also says, to guide our laws. We don't need religion or God's laws to dictate our current laws. But see, all our current laws come from somewhere. Even the stanza of the original Constitution are extrapolated from Bible verses or extrapolated from religious teachings of the church. So, and if you look at laws in every country in the world, a lot of the laws mimic biblical laws or laws of the Abrahamic religions. Because all the laws that are used to govern humanity all come from somewhere. And the place that they come from primarily is the Abrahamic faiths. That's where the laws come from. Because without that, you will live in a lawless society. When you take a higher power out of society, there is nothing teaching them or helping them to discern what is good or wrong. Who is to say, without God or his laws, what is good and what is bad? Like, for example, you take out the Bible, you take out the belief patterns that are illustrated in the Abrahamic faiths and the values instilled in them, then why is murder bad? Why is grape bad? Why is it bad to steal? Why is it all these things we know these things are wrong because we know intrinsically that there is a higher power, and we know intrinsically it's our duty to follow that higher power. And everyone knows who's educated intrinsically knows there is good and there is evil. And even a lot of atheists would still agree with that there is good and evil. Well, where does the good and the evil separate? Where is the distinction? If you don't believe in a higher power, what dictates the separation here? Good are those who follow those laws, and evil would be those who break them and are lawless. But if the law goes back to the Abrahamic faiths, then those laws go back to creationism, and those laws go back to a higher power. There's nothing else that conjures up these intrinsic beliefs that we have in us. It's not something that we don't have a moral code without knowing a higher power. And that's just the simplicity of it. And he also goes on to say, you can't say that atheists are evil without acknowledging the Crusades or the Salem witch trials or the fact that Christianity is forced on children. So, obviously, right, with things like the Crusades, every religious organization and every people has done great harm to other groups of people throughout history. And there's always a matter of twisting. People can take any document, any book, any belief, and twist it to however that they want to twist it to. But it doesn't underline the consensus of the belief itself. And you have to remember, all right, this is a hallmark element to it, right? If you were going to talk about Salem witch trials, if we're going to talk about things that were done, now I'm not even necessarily agreeing that, because he brought in things like the Crusades, I'm not even necessarily putting the blame on Christianity for these things, but let's say these people claim that they were Christians doing these acts, right, perpetrating these acts. That's like using the argument, well, it was those who, in the name of Christianity, did slavery and things like that. And I'm not necessarily even agreeing with that 100%, because that's not the case. But the mainstream consensus is that, so I'll go ahead and just concede to it just to make this point. You have to remember something. Even if you were to say that bad things have been done in the name of people who claim they were Christians, Christianity itself in the Bible is clear on many different things. And if you were to say these things are wrong, there has to be a reason that they are wrong, right? Slavery, genocide, grape, PDF-ism. What's to stop these things from being okay, or an argument for them being okay to be made, without a law set in stone from the Abrahamic faiths, without a previous incarnation and without a previous understanding in the parchment, in the scriptures, that these things are unacceptable? That's going down something called a slippery slope, where if you say one thing is okay, now all of a sudden everything is going to be okay. Good and evil is already outlined for us in the Bible, in the Quran. It's outlined. Now again, obviously I don't, agree with these, but I'm saying the Abrahamic faiths just for this argument, because the brother will understand exactly what I'm saying. But it has to come from somewhere. We already know these parchments speak of the good and evil message and the difference. Being good is following the laws of God. Being evil is being lawless and falling into your own perversions and your own will and whatever you're choosing to do. Our flesh is not ours. Our flesh belongs to the higher power. And that's simple. When humans are given over to their flesh, they do things like PDFism, slavery, grape, genocide, unaliving. These are the things that human beings do when they're godless. So I don't think we should be advocating for people to be godless. We need to be God-full and have the Holy Spirit within us. That is the only thing that's going to keep humanity in check. Now, moving along, because I want to address everything he says. He says that Christianity is forced on children more than trans kids. Now, listen, I know, and I've always noticed this. Allow me to be a little anecdotal for a second. When atheists criticize religion or higher power, 99.999% of the time, atheists will crap on God and religion, so to speak. It's always Christianity that they go after. I don't really hear many atheists complaining about Islam, Buddhism, Judaism. I mean, do you hear many atheists going on about these other... It's almost always Christianity that atheists have a problem with. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's rather interesting. And I think that says actually a lot positive about Christianity, by the way. But see, as far as saying forced on children more than trans kids, I can speak anecdotally on this. In my school, especially toward the end, we had to learn about the LGBTQ. We had to learn about transgenders because that stuff was coming to light. That was around the time of, we would have the Caitlyn Jenner nonsense come to light and everything else around that era in the mid-2010s. The Bible is not taught in school, okay? But I can show on record that LGBTQ is taught in school. I'm not saying it's an entire curriculum, but it is taught. So this argument really holds no weight. Because unless we're saying that now we're having 30 minutes delegated to the Bible and now we're having sometimes dealt to the LGBTQ, then that argument does not hold no weight. I don't see Bible reading story hour with the children. However, I do see drag queen story hour. Okay? So I totally disagree with this argument. And that's another thing. If you these gay pride rallies, right, at their core, and if you look at their websites, if you look at the hallmarks of their mission statement, so to speak, they want to indoctrinate the young. There have been LGBTQ activists I've seen on Rumble and other places that have said their main objective is to indoctrinate the young. And the thing of it is, if this was just about them wanting to live their lifestyle or whatever behind closed doors, or however they want to live, like I don't care what you do in your bedroom, but you go in these rallies, it's absolutely disgusting. They're flashing their genitalias all around in public and everything else. I mean, you can just go look at videos of this, and there are children who are present at these events. Christians do not do this. Christians do not have at their churches, they're not flashing their genitalia to possible new members of the church. That's not taking place. This is something that the LGBTQIA whatever is doing specifically, because their only identity is what they're choosing to do in their bedroom. So this isn't just a lifestyle. This is their entire culture. Their entire personality is devoted to their sexuality. So they're actually putting their sexuality above even their status as a human being. So I totally disagree with the claim that Christianity is forced on children more than being a transgender, because there are numerous examples of transgenderism and LGBTQ trying to indoctrinate younger children. And in these schools, this is what they're listening to. They're listening to these talking heads talk about sexuality and teach about these kind of things to very young, impressionable children. And the fact there's no Bible lessons in school and they're not being exposed to the gospel, they can't absorb the message of Christianity. So by default, you would have to say that the LGBTQ is being forced on kids more. And he says there was always a Bible in the school library and nobody put a law in place to block its spread like Christians do to gay or trans people. Well, there's no laws to block trans or gay people. That's the thing. There's no law. I mean, there's biblical laws, but again, in the eyes of America, in the eyes of capitalism and the current government society, it's legal what they do. There's no restrictions to what they do. And I would argue, from a purely legal perspective, there's a lot of gray area for them. Because a lot of things that they have put out there are very morally questioning. And like I said, going down the slippery slope. Now this is okay, and next PDFism will be okay, and everything else. There have been articles written by gay and other LGBT professors that have tried to defend PDFism. So see, this is the slippery slope working in real time. They've been given free reign to be married and these kinds of things. This is legal now, but they want more. You see what I mean about, this is what I'm saying, good and evil. Evil is going to always want more. It's never going to be what they have at this present time. When you give in to evil, evil is going to continue to want more and more and more. And this is also another separation between these two labels. And he says, look at the Klan. They preach Christianity during burnings. Like we all know what they burn on lawns. Yeah, he's referring to the burning cross. What has atheism ever done? Well, Einstein was an atheist. Frederick Douglass, Stephen Hawking, Mr. Epstein Island. And then he said our founding fathers wanted the separation of church and state. Well, the reason that the founding fathers wanted the separation of church and state is because they were not really Christian. They did not really believe in having a Christian law. They cited the Bible when it was convenient for them, but Full of Pestilence, I'm sure, is completely aware. Our country is deeply rooted in mysticism, Gnosticism, Kabbalism, and Freemasonry. All our founding fathers were so-called Freemasons of the 33rd degree. This country was formed for a couple reasons, but the main reason was to fulfill later biblical prophecy of this being Babylon the Great, the nation that will make all the nations drunk off the wine of their indignation. This was always to be a wicked empire, to supersede the Roman Empire, a previous wicked empire before it. Okay. Man, it disappeared again. I'm having some connection issues. All right. So he said, look at the Klan. They preach Christianity during cross burnings. Okay, I don't think there's anybody in the world today that studies Christianity, these other Abrahamic faiths, that would look back on what the KKK did or claimed to do and say the KKK acted in Christian values. They used the Bible to twist it, and honestly, they didn't even twist it because they never went into it. They did it in the name of, anyone could do anything in the name of anything. I could say I'm doing something in the name of, I could say I'm doing something in the name of Islam, but really at the demonstration, I'm ripping the Quran in pieces. Anybody could say they're doing anything in the name of anything. It's the actions that are going to represent it, right? We know that the KKK does not represent the action of Christianity. They do not represent the values that are in the Holy Bible. We know that already. So that really doesn't hold any water in your comment, in my opinion, because Christians have come out and condemned what the Klan talked about, what the Klan preached, what they advocated for. And I just recently watched the guy out in fucking Arkansas somewhere, I don't know what his name is. He's one of the last knights of the KKK. Of course, it's a completely rogue organization now with almost no members. There's like 400 members of the Klan. I mean, there are other hate groups of other nationalities that have way more members that nobody talks about, but people are still talking about the Klan. Nobody gives a shit what the Klan has to say anymore. Rightfully so. They're a bunch of inbred, redneck morons. And most of them are MAGA, and most of them are idiots. Their average IQ probably is like 30. But I watched one of these guys, I think it's Tom Robb maybe, and he was interviewed by Bryce Crawford, who's a Christian preacher, and they were discussing doctrine. He didn't know anything about the Bible. He really didn't know anything about nothing. His interpretation of the Bible was probably one of the dumbest I've ever heard. So I don't think we could even, for one moment, equate Christianity with the KKK, when the KKK knows absolutely nothing about Christianity. So I don't even think we can really make that comparison fairly. And then he cites, Einstein and Frederick Douglass, who were atheists, who did not believe in a higher power. I'm not saying there weren't people who did positive things for the world, if you will, who were atheists. But in the case of Einstein, he was a Jayish man, right? And he said that his people were being G, and then a word, and then ending with a D. I'm trying not to get blocked off the face of the earth here. And then during World War II, there was an event that took place, and of course he said that was wrong. But without a higher power, without believing in a higher power, who's to say that that was wrong? Where's your moral code coming from? You see the problem? Frederick Douglass advocated against slavery. But if we take out the Abrahamic faiths, the law established in those faiths, and that there are right things to do in our life, there's a certain way to treat people, and there's a certain way not to treat people, then who is it to say that slavery is right or wrong? You understand? Without the belief in the higher power, what is wrong with slavery? See the problem here? And then, of course, at the end he puts, my original objection was to you calling atheists stupid, though. That was in a broad sense. Obviously, Full of Pestilence knows full well that I don't think he's stupid. He's a very, very smart young man. And like I said, I think he's a very, very intelligent soul. And, I'll just be flat out honest with everybody listening. I wish more people were like Full of Pestilence. And even though, me and him disagree on a lot of stuff, I think we probably agree more than we disagree on things. And we can have those conversations because we're respectable men, And I think his spirit, and even though he doesn't believe in the Lord, he does not believe in Yahweh, I think there's definitely a possibility that we can get him to believe in Yahweh. That's what I believe, because I think he has the right spirit that can lead him into that direction. I'm not gonna evangelize him, but I'm just saying. And he puts, they don't go out of their way to shame different religions. They let them exist. It's only happening to Christianity because of all the evil that it has done. So again, with his claim that Christianity is being forced on people. I mean, like I said, in 2026, I don't see that. I see Judaism being forced on people, like our entire government. I see Islam being forced on all these countries in the Middle East and other places. I see, even in Asia, and large portions of Asia, they actually don't allow you really to read Bibles or believe in Christ. And you take North Korea, even for example, if you're caught with a Bible, it's automatic death penalty. So they don't allow, they don't allow you to believe in. So I don't see Christians. I mean, if he can show me proof of people in the name of Christianity who believe in fundamental biblical-based Christianity forcing people to believe, if he could show me that, then I'll be open to it. But he's making that claim, and I just don't see that. Like I said, in fact, I see atheists, and almost every atheist I've ever talked to, with the exception of Full of Pestilence, but in the past, the only belief system that they will talk shit about is Christianity. They don't have that same energy for Islam and these other beliefs. And like I said, to me, in my experience and everything that I've ever seen, atheism is very little to do with not believing in God and more just having a hatred for God because of what you believe, things that he's allowed in the world to happen. But the same free will that they complain about is the same free will that they exercise by not believing in the first place. So I just wanted to respond and do a full response to everything Full of Pestilence said in his comments, as I said that I would. The YouTube overlords didn't let me respond in the comment section, but I wanted to give him a full-fledged response episode to his statements because I don't want him to think I'm taking his statements lightly. I want to respond to everything he said to the best of my ability. Full of Pestilence is a great brother. He's a great friend of mine. I consider him a good friend. And he's gonna be on the podcast one of these days. I'm gonna get him on. We're gonna do a special. We're gonna be discussing some stuff and dropping the heat. So, yep, he's gonna be on the Gentile Defender. But for now, this is the Gentile Defender signing off. As a shout out again to Full of Pestilence. He's a great brother. If you're not subscribed to his channel, go subscribe to him. And this is me signing off. Thank you.